Hello, welcome to our third lesson, and in our third lesson we are going to look at introduction part of report writing or project report. Now in our last lesson we looked at the preliminary pages or what comes before chapter number 1, and on introduction we can say we have 1.0, that's the overview where we outline what will be contained in the chapter. Then we have 1.1, that is the background to the study. This one actually gives the introduction of the research agenda that you are going to investigate. So you define the major concepts and the keywords identified in the title of the study, showing its relationship with the existing works of literature and the gaps in the knowledge. You have to state what will be done in the research under background, and you always take a V-concept approach whereby you start with the ideal international understanding of the concept, followed by the continental, then regional, before you do a local perspective. Now, still under introduction, we have statement of the problem, and this one can be named as 1.2. In this case, you expect to discuss the issues surrounding your research topic, providing a detailed information on the effect of the status quo on the intended population in the to be studied. So in most cases, it may begin with this project addresses the problem of, so you should be able to do it clearly so that it conveys the purpose of the study. Opening statement should state the ideal situation, which is followed by what is currently, or what we are having currently, and this one open up the gap. It opens up the gap that you want to fill, and that is the reason why you are carrying out the study. So it should also give an explanation of the specific issues being investigated, providing problem indicators and supportive evidences. So you explain, still under the statement of the problem, you explain the purpose of the study, which should be well in line with the nature and the scope of the problem. And therefore means that when stating a problem, then the researcher should address the existing ones before providing the preferred solutions. And still under background, we have what still under introduction, we have the objectives of the study. And objectives of the study, in some researches we can also talk of purpose of the study. These are just the aims of carrying out the study. So you formulate the specific objectives based on the research problem and the identified gap that you want to fill. They should support the general objective of or the purpose of the study, and they should take or assume action words like to determine, to assess, to establish, to investigate, etc. So they are declarative in nature, not as interrogative as research questions. Now when we look at research questions, it's also part of the introduction on our report, and this one can be named as 1.4. These are normally derived from research objectives, and they should be equally numbered to the research objectives. They actually just assist the researcher to obtain data from the respondents during the time he's collecting information for his research or her research. That means that out of the research questions, we can get questionnaire items, and therefore research questions are interrogative in nature. They try to find answers. Then we have the research hypothesis. This one we still come across it under introduction part of the project report. It is a statement representing the researcher's understanding of an answer or the answer to the problem of the research that she or he is carrying out. Now, this can be also referred to as a concise, justifiable, testable, and falsifiable statement. About an expected relationship between the variables. We just come up with a statement, and this statement can be verified and can be verified using a scientific means or a scientific method. So we can therefore say that the hypothesis is just a specific statement whose validity and workability can be tested by means of scientific method. They try to determine the relationship between or that exists between two variables, okay, and they reveal the cause-effect situation between the variables. We should also know that what we are calling as hypothesis, they can assume the positive form or a negative form. Positive hypotheses are referred to as alternative, and the negative ones are what we call the null. A positive, an alternative hypothesis can be like, you talk of there is a significant, I've just given an example here that there is a significant influence of drug abuse on drivers' personalities. This one here is an alternative because it is assuming a positive form. It is positive in nature. We are trying to show that positive relationship between the drug abuse and the personalities, that once we have drug abuse in drivers, then this one will have a significance, having a significance to their personalities. Now we can negate this so that we come up with the null hypothesis by introducing a no, and this one will read, there is no significant influence of drug abuse on drivers' personalities. This one now becomes a null hypothesis. Then, before you do formulation of the hypothetical statements, you should be able to do enough initial research by going through all the previous academic papers and previous studies done by other researchers and experiments for you to come up with a hypothesis. And this one here should be proven through the research that you are going to carry out. Next, we have what you call the assumptions of the study. The assumptions of the study can be named as 1.6. Now, these are just assumptions or mere statements which are frequently not subjected to any testing. That means they are taken for granted. They are just factors taken as true throughout the research period, thus requiring no investigation. That's why they are called assumptions. So the variables that are assumed to be constant, these ones are normally taken to be constant so as to delimit the researcher. We are just trying to assume some things so that we at least don't waste much time in finding out what the evidence is. Not really the evidences, but the validity in the statements that we make. So this is just an assumption, and there's no need of including assumption in the study sometimes if we have the hypothesis, although some experts would want to put them together, and others would want to say, let's just have the hypothesis and do away with the assumptions, although these two are two different things. Then we have justification of the study. This one is also part of the introduction, part of the project report, and it's named as 1.7. Now this justification of the study, we are trying to say that a researcher should be able to articulate the reason as to why he considers or she considers his study or her study to be vital, to be important. So this may be taken in line with the impact of the problem on productivity, or the fact that the area has not been prioritized and given in first investigation as it deserves. And that's why you come up with a study and you want to do it because you've seen there's nothing has been done, or there is a need of investigation. And therefore, you should do this by supportive evidence as to why the study is going to be carried out. And then we have the significance. Significance of the study actually should indicate who will, in this case, the researcher is trying to indicate who is going to benefit from the research findings, the stakeholders, people, or anyone that will be able to benefit from the research findings. That is the significance. And the research should have something to add in the research field, no matter how small it is, and that is why we do research. So benefits of the study should be itemized or paraphrased, and a clarification made on the possible benefits of the research and to whom should it be meant for. Then we have the scope of the study. The scope of the study actually refers to the level of coverage of the research topic under investigation. It therefore means that a good statement problem will help the researcher to know the scope at which he's going to handle or she's going to handle. So the researcher should describe the study in terms of its coverage, as we mentioned about the variables, the location where you're going to be collecting data, the sample sizes, the population, the target population. So that is the study focus, and you also mention about the time it will take for your research to or the time it took your research to to come to an end. Then we have the limitations. The limitation is 1.10. It is also under the introduction part of a research report. And these are just challenges that a researcher goes through during the project work, and the researcher may not have control over them. So limitation may be in relation to the sample size or the scope of the study or anything that will want to limit you or a researcher in carrying out research effectively. However, the researcher should be able to explain to us what was done to reduce on the limitation effects, because if we have limitations, then we expect the research not to be so much effective or successful. So there should be a means or a way or measures that you could put in place, or you could have put in place, or you did put in place to reduce on the effects. Then we have the last one, and of course it can be the last or the least, under introduction, and this is operational definition of terms. Although I mentioned earlier on about definition of terms in abbreviations, but you realize that most experts will put operational definition of terms in the introduction part of the research project. In this case, or in this particular section, you have to mention the concept that I used and the terminologies that I use, and you define them. The terminologies that have been operationally used, it means that these are terminologies which have been adapted and so utilized restrictively for the purpose of a research project. So it is very important for us to be able to be defined, so that we can be able to understand what the terminologies that you used are meant for. So we have just gone through the introduction part of our project report, and I started by having the outlining, and this one is under overview. We also shared something to do with the background of the study, and then we did mention about statement of the problem, where you state the problem that you are going to handle. And then we also looked at the objectives of the study, whereby we say the objectives of the study are specific, and they are formulated from based on the research problems and the identified gaps, and they should be SMART. That means they should be specific, measurable, realistic, achievable, and also time bound. And then we also looked at the research of questions, and in this case we say they are formulated and they should be equal in number to the research objectives. They just are, after formulation of the objectives, we derive the questions. These questions here will assist us come up with the questionnaire items that we shall be using in the field as we shall be collecting data. Then we talked about research hypotheses, whereby we say we come up with the statements that can be verified, that can be tested by a scientific method. That means they are valid and are workable and can be proven. And these statements can either be take the positive form or the negative form, and we just talked about the null and the being the negative form of hypothesis. We also talked about the alternative as the positive ones. And then we as well mentioned that for us to come up with a hypothesis, then it means we must do thorough research or initial research by going through various theories that we all know, that we have come across through our literature review, academic papers that have already been done by other people, or previous studies and experiments, for us to come up with a statement or hypothesis that can be proven throughout our research. Then we shared something about assumptions, whereby we say the assumptions are just mere statements that cannot be tested, and these statements are normally taken for granted just to delimit the researcher. Then we shared about the justification of the study, whereby we want to know how vital your study is, or why do you think your study is going to be important or vital. And then the significance, we talked about it, and we said in this case the researcher should be able to indicate who are going to benefit, or the stakeholders that are going to benefit from our research. Then we looked at about the scope of the study, whereby we shared and we say that in this case we need to know the coverage or the scope where our study is going to cover. That means we talk about the target population and the variables that are going to be measured. Then we talked about limitations of the study as the challenges, and also we looked at the operationalization of terms or terminologies which should be defined. So thank you very much for attending to this lesson. I hope you have understood something or gained something on introduction part of a project report. I believe we are going to meet again in our next lesson, that is when we shall be looking at chapter number 2. Have a nice time. Enjoy your day.